Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to have you with us here. Sorry. I decided to dress up for the occasion to give you, you children an understanding of what some of the costumes might have looked like in the story of the Little Lame Prince. Some of the princes and dukes and some of the people of the court would have worn something like this. I will, at the end, show it a bit more to you, and also show you my walking stick again. And I'm really glad to have you all back. I'm glad that you tuned in. It's just wonderful to have you here. And just, I decided to add a little bit of beauty to the reading today by wearing this, even for me, a little bit outrageous, wonderful outfit. I'll tell you a story about it afterwards. But today we're starting on chapter 3, and I have background music just to make it even more entertaining. So last time, we learned that the Little Lame Prince's name was Dolar, after the woman in gray who loved him and appeared. He has been, he had the crown of no man's land, but he had to have a caregiver, and the Prince Regent, he became a Prince Regent. And he had a guard of honor with two whole regiments of soldiers. The nation learned without much surprise that the poor little prince, nobody ever called him king now, had gone on a much longer journey than to the beautiful mountains. The story was he had fallen, I'm just reviewing, the story was he had fallen ill on the road and died within a few hours. At least so declared the physician in attendance and the nurse who'd been sent to take care of him. They brought his coffin back in great state and buried it in the mausoleum with his parents. How sad. This book just started and he's already died. So Prince Dolar was seen no more. The country went into deep mourning for him and then forgot him. And his uncle reigned in his stead. If you remember, the uncle was jealous. He wanted to be king himself. And he was put in charge of the young prince. And he acted as a caregiver for him in some ways. And as you remember, he was injured when he was presented to court by a lady-in-waiting who was vain and decided her train of her dress was more important, a little bit like this, with jewels and sparkly things, but a dress, she was going up the marble staircase and she was so involved in making sure she looked good. She was so vain that she dropped him and it injured his spine, and then he couldn't walk anymore and was carried around by someone else. And as I said, in those days, disabilities, you were invisible, and he was invisible to everyone around. And now that's not true. We have other ways now where people can be rehabilitated and mechanical ways for them to walk, and they're taken seriously. But in those days, if you were a cripple, as they would say, you were invisible. No one even paid attention to you. And as I said the other day, I'm sure there are people who you know who have disabilities in your neighborhood who live alone in another apartment. Reach out to them and just show them that someone loves them. That would be a really wonderful thing. So, as we left it off, he was supposedly dead, and his uncle reigned in his stead. That illustrious personage accepted his crown with great decorum, the uncle, and wore it with great dignity to the last. But whether he enjoyed it or not, there is no evidence to show. Chapter 3 now. And what of the little lame prince whom everybody seems so easily to have forgotten? Not everybody. There were a few kinds of souls, mothers of families who had heard his sad story, and some servants about the palace who had been familiar with his sweet ways. These many a time sighed and said, "Poor Prince Dolar." Or looking at the beautiful mountains which were visible all over no man's land, though few people ever visited them, Well, perhaps His Royal Highness is better where he is than ever, even there. Sorry. Well, perhaps His Royal Highness is better where he is than even there in the mountains. They did not know, indeed, hardly anybody did know, that beyond the mountains, between them and the sea, lay a country, barren, level, bare, except for short, stunted grass, and here and there a patch of tiny flowers. Not a bush, not a tree, not a resting place for bird or beast was in that dreary plain. In summer the sunshine fell upon it hour after hour with a blinding glare. In winter the winds and rains swept over it unhindered, and the snow came down steadily, noisily, covering it from end to end in one great white sheet, which lay for days and weeks unmarked by a single footprint. Not a pleasant place to live in, and nobody did live there, apparently. The only sign that human creatures had ever been near the spot was one large round tower which rose up in the center of the plain, and might be seen all over it, if there had been anybody to see, which there never was. Rose right up out of the ground as if it had grown of itself like a mushroom. But it was not at all mushroom-like. On the contrary, it was very solidly built. In form, it resembled the Irish round towers which have puzzled people for so long, nobody being able to find out when, or by whom, or for what purpose were they made, seemingly for no use at all, like this tower. It was circular, a very firm brickwork which neither doors nor windows until near the top, when you could perceive some slits in the wall through which one might possibly creep in or look out. Its height were nearly 100 feet, and it had battlemented parapet showing sharp against the sky. When I finish this story, I'll tell you about my adventure in Ireland, right outside of Dublin, and a round tower. As the plain was quite desolate, almost like a desert, only without sand, and led to nowhere except the still more desolate seacoast, nobody ever crossed it. Whatever mystery there was about the tower, it and the sky and the plain kept their secret to themselves. It was a very great secret indeed, a state secret which none but so clever a man as the present king of no man's land would ever have thought of. How we carried it out undiscovered I cannot tell. People said long afterward that it was by means of a gang of condemned criminals who were set to work and executed immediately after they had done. They were executed immediately after they had done what they had done, so that nobody knew anything or in the least suspected the real fact. And what was the fact? Why, that this tower, which seemed a mere mass of masonry, utterly forsaken and uninhabited, was not so at all. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of tea, and when I finish this tea, I want to show you boys and girls this cup. This is an old teacup from about the period of the book was written, and it's a mustache cup. Since I have a beard, it's a mustache, and it helps keep the mustache out of the tea. Within 20 feet of the top, some ingenious architect had planned a perfect little house divided into 4 rooms, as by drawing a cross within a circle, you will see might easily be done. By making skylights and a few slits in the walls for windows, and raising a peaked roof which was hidden by the parapet, here was a dwelling complete, 8 feet from the ground and as inaccessible as a rook's nest in the top of a tree. For you boys and girls, a rook is a special kind of bird, especially in England and in Ireland, I believe. They usually nest on tops of trees. They're very hard to get. There's an old 1920s game called Rook. You should ask your parents about that. A charming place to live in, if you once got up there and never wanted to come down again. Inside, though nobody could have looked inside except a bird, and hardly even a bird flew past that lonely tower. Inside it was furnished with all the comfort and elegance imaginable, with lots of books and toys, and everything that the heart of a child could desire. For its only inhabitant, except the nurse of course, was a poor solitary child. One winter night, when all the plain was white with moonlight, there was crossing it a great tall black horse, hidden by a man also big and equally black, carrying before him on the saddle a woman and a child. The woman, she had a sad, fierce look, and no wonder, for she was a criminal under the sentence of death. But her sentence had been changed to almost as severe a punishment. She was to inhabit the lonely tower with the child, and was allowed to live as long as the child lived, no longer. This, in order that she might take the utmost care of him, for those who put them there were equally afraid of his dying and of his living. And yet he was only a little gentle boy with a sweet, sleepy smile. He had been very tired from his long journey, and clinging arms which held tight to the man's neck, for he was rather frightened, and the face, black as it was, looked kindly at him. He was very helpless, with his poor, small, shriveled legs, which could neither stand or run away, for the little forlorn boy was Prince Dolar. He had not been dead at all, or buried either. His grand funeral had been a mere pretense. A wax figure had been put in his place, while he himself was spirited away under the charge of these two, the condemned woman and the black man. The latter was deaf and silent, so could neither tell nor repeat anything. When they reached the foot of the tower, there was light enough to see a huge chain dangling from a parapet, but dangling only halfway. The deaf-mute took from his saddle wallet a sort of ladder arranged in pieces like a puzzle, fitted it together, and lifted it up to meet the chain. Then he mounted to the top of the tower and slung from it a sort of chair in which the woman and child placed themselves and were drawn up, never to come down again as long as they lived. Leaving them there, the man descended the ladder, took it to pieces again, and packed it in his pack, mounted the horse, and disappeared across the plain. Later, I'll show you an etching in the book about it. Every month they used to watch for him, appearing like a speck in the distance. He fastened his horse to the foot of the tower and climbed it, as before, laden with provisions and many other things. He also saw the prince, so as to make sure the child was alive and well, and then he went away until the following month. While his childhood lasted, Prince Dolar was happy enough. He had every luxury that even a prince could need, and the one thing wanting, love, never having known, he did not miss. I don't believe that. That's a lie. Psychiatrists and physicians know that if a child doesn't experience love, they begin to die. So I remember, I think I told you about visiting, my friend said the most haunting memory was going to Russia and visiting the newborn cribs in an orphanage in Russia, and not one baby was crying. They had given up life. So let's go on. His nurse was very kind to him, though she was a wicked woman. But either she had not been quite so wicked as people said, or she grew better through being shut up continually with this little innocent child, who was dependent upon her for every comfort and pleasure in his life. It was not an unhappy life. There was nobody to tease or ill-use him, and he was never ill. He played about from room to room. There were 4 rooms, parlor, kitchen, his nurse's bedroom, and his own. Learned to crawl like a fly and to jump like a frog and to run about on all 4s as almost fast as a puppy. In fact, he was very much like a puppy or a kitten. As thoughtless and as merry, scarcely ever cross, though sometimes a little weary, like a puppy and a kitten. As he grew older, he occasionally liked to be quiet for a while, and then he would sit at the slits of the windows, which were, however, much bigger than they looked from the bottom of the tower, and watch the sky above and the ground below, with the storm sweeping over and the sunshine coming and going, and the shadows of the clouds running races across the blank plain. By and by, he began to learn lessons. Not that his nurse had been ordered to teach him, but she did it partly to amuse herself. She was not a stupid woman, and Prince Dolar was by no means a stupid boy. So they got on very well, and his continual entreaty, "What can I do? What can you find me to do?" was stopped, at least for an hour or two a day. It was a dull life, but he had never known any other. Anyway, he remembered no other, and did not pity himself at all. Not for a long time, till he grew quite a big little boy and could read quite easily. Then he suddenly took to books, which a deaf-mute brought him from time to time. Books which, not being acquainted with the literature of no man's land, I cannot describe, but no doubt they were very interesting, and they informed him of everything in the outside world, and filled him with intense longing to see it. From this time a change came over the boy. He began to look sad and thin, and to shut himself up for hours without speaking. For his nurse hardly spoke, and whatever questions he asked beyond their ordinary daily life, she never answered. She had indeed been forbidden, on pain of death, to tell him anything about himself, who he was or what he might have been. He knew he was Prince Dolar because she always addressed him as "my prince" and "your royal highness." But what a prince he had not the least idea. He had no idea of anything in the world except what he found in his books. How many of you children read books? I would encourage you while you're at home to begin to read more books. It would be a really wonderful thing. As my friend said, I have this huge library that is filled with books that someday I'll read. He said, today is a someday, so this is a someday I'm reading to you. He sat one day surrounded by them, having built them up around like a little castle wall, the books. He'd been reading them half the day, but feeling all the while that to read about things which you never can see is like hearing about a beautiful dinner while you are starving. For the first time in his life, he grew melancholy. His hands fell on his lap. He sat gazing out of the window slit upon the view outside. The view he had looked at every day of his life and might look at for endless days more. Not a very cheerful view, just the plain and the sky, but he liked it. He used to think if he could only fly out of that window, up to the sky or down to the plain, how nice it would be. Perhaps when he died, his nurse had told him once in anger that he would never leave the tower till he died. He might be able to do this. Not that he understood much what dying meant, but it must be a change, or any change seemed to him to be a blessing. Boys and girls, this seems to me to be a classic description of depression, actually. Let's keep going on. And I wish I had somebody to tell me all about it, about that and many other things. Somebody that would be fond of me like my poor white kitten. Here the tears came into his eyes, and for the boy's one friend, the one interest in his life had been a little white kitten, which the deaf-mute, kindly smiling, once took out of his pocket and gave him. The only living creature Prince Dolar had ever seen. For 4 weeks it was his constant plaything and companion, till one moonlight night it took a fancy for wandering, climbed onto the parapet of the tower, dropped over and disappeared. It was not killed, he hoped, for cats have 9 lives. Indeed, he almost fancied he saw it pick itself up and scamper away, but he never caught sight of it more. Yes, I wish I had something better than a kitten, a person, a real live person who would be fond of me and kind to me. Oh, I want somebody dreadfully, dreadfully. As he spoke, there sounded behind him a slight tap, 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 as if a stick or a cane, and twisting himself around, he saw, what do you think he saw? Nothing either frightening or ugly, but still exceedingly curious. A little woman no bigger than he might himself have been, his legs grown like those of other children. But she was not a child, she was an old woman. Her hair was gray, and her dress was gray, and there was a gray shadow over her wherever she moved. But she had the sweetest smile, the prettiest hands, and when she spoke it was in the softest voice imaginable. My dear little boy, and dropping her cane, the only bright and rich thing about her, my dear little boy, and dropping her cane, the only bright and rich thing about her, she laid those 2 tiny hands on his shoulders. My own little boy, I could not come to you until you had said you wanted me. And now you do want me, and here I am. And you are very welcome, madam, replied the prince, trying to speak politely, as princes always did in books, and I am exceedingly obliged to you. May I ask who you are? Perhaps my mother? For he knew that little boys usually had a mother and occasionally wondered what would become of his own. No, said the visitor with a tender, half-sad smile, putting back the hair from his forehead and looking right into his eyes. No, I am not your mother, but she was a dear friend of mine, and you are as like her as ever you can be. Will you tell her to come see me then? She cannot. I dare say she knows all about you, and she loves you very much, and so do I. And I want to help you all I can, my poor little boy. Why do you call me poor? Said Prince Dolor in surprise. The little old woman glanced down on his legs and feet, which he did not know were different from those of other children, and then at his sweet, bright face, which, though he knew not that either, was exceedingly different from many other children's faces, which are often so fretful, cross, and sullen. Looking at him instead of sighing, she smiled. I beg your pardon, my prince, said she. Yes, I am a prince, and my name is Dolor. Will you tell me yours, madam? The little old woman laughed like a chime of silver bells. I have not got a name, or rather, I have so many names that I don't know which one to choose. However, it was I who gave you yours, and you will belong to me all your days. I am your godmother. Hurrah! Cried the little prince. I'm glad I belong to you, for I like you very much. Will you come and play with me? So they sat down together and played. By and by they began to talk. Are you very dull here? Asked the little old woman. Meaning bored. Not particularly, thank you, godmother. I have plenty to eat and drink and my lessons to do and my books to read. Lots of books. And you want nothing? Nothing, yes, perhaps. If you please, godmother, could you bring me just one more thing? What sort of thing? A little boy to play with. The old woman looked very sad. Just the thing, alas, which I cannot give you. My child, I cannot alter your lot in any way, but I can help you to bear it. Thank you. Why do you talk of bearing it? I have nothing to bear. My poor little man, said the old woman in the very tenderest tone of her tender voice. Kiss me. What is kissing? Asked the wondering child. His godmother took him in her arms and embraced him many times. By and by, he kissed her back again, at first awkwardly and shyly, then with all the strength of his warm little heart. You are better to cuddle than even my white kitten, I think, he said. Promise me that you will never go away. I must, but I will leave a present behind me. Something as good as myself to amuse you. Something that will take you wherever you want to go and show you all that you wish to see. What is it? A traveling cloak. The prince's countenance fell. I don't want a cloak, for I never go out. Sometimes nurse hoists me onto the roof and carries me around by the parapet, but that is all. I can't walk, you know, as she does. The more reason why you should ride, and besides, this traveling cloak. Hush, she's coming. There sounded outside the room door a heavy step and a grumpy voice and a rattle of plates and dishes. It's my nurse, and she's bringing my dinner, and I don't want dinner at all. I only want you. Will her coming drive you away, godmother? Perhaps, but only for a little while. Never mind, all the bolts and bars in the world couldn't keep me out. I'd fly in at the window or down through the chimney, only wish for me and I come. Thank you, said Prince Dolor in almost a whisper, for he was very uneasy what might happen next. His nurse and his godmother, what would they say to one another? How would they look at one another, two such different faces? One harsh-lined, sullen, cross, and sad. The other sweet, bright, and calm as a summer evening before the dark begins. When the door was flung open, Prince Dolor shut his eyes, trembling all over. Opening them again, he saw he need fear nothing. His lovely old godmother had melted away just like the rainbow out of the sky, and as he watched it many a time, nobody but his nurse was in the room. What a muddle your Royal Highness is sitting in, she said sharply. Such a heap of untidy books, and what's this rubbish? Knocking a little bundle that lay beside them. Oh, nothing, nothing, give it to me, cried the prince, and darting after it, he hid it under his pinafore, then pushed it quickly into his pocket. Rubbish as it was left in the place where she sat. It might be something belonging to her, his dear, kind godmother, whom he already loved with all his lonely, tender, passionate heart. It was though he did not know this, his wonderful traveling cloak. So next time we'll be reading chapter 4 tomorrow, and we'll be finding out what the traveling cloak is. But now as I finish, I want to show you a couple of things that would have fitted into the story as far as what we call sartorial splendor or pleasure. This is a walking stick, but many a prince would have a walking stick like this. This is actually from the Victorian period. It has a sword inside. So, touche, you do away, you touch my damsel and I will stab you. Thought you'd like to see that. Now I'm going to finish my tea just for a second and show you the cup, and then I'll show you what I have on a little bit more as we get prepared to end this program. A proper teacup is not like a mug. We have mugs with no saucers. A teacup always has a saucer, so if there's a spill, it catches in the saucer. Some 18th century teacups have no handles. This one has one. It's more 19th century. 18th century and even early American teacups were just a round cup. I'll show one to you tomorrow. A round cup with a deep saucer, and what they would do, the tea would be too hot, so they pour it in the saucer to cool, and they sip it that way. This is the next variation of that. So I'm going to get up now, and I'm going to show you the inside of the cup. It's a very interesting thing. This is called a mustache cup, and the reason it's called a mustache cup, look at that. It has a ridge so that when you sip it and you have a mustache, it holds the mustache up so you don't get your mustache stained with tea. So how about that? Have another sip. My last sip. So that's what a mustache cup looks like. I'm going to put it over here, and then I'm going to show you what I have on. This is like a smocker, almost like a nightshirt. It's from the Middle East, and it's worn a lot there. And this is a robe I found in the thrift store. It has my initial on the back, which I put on. And it's a phoenix. Peacock or a phoenix, which is a symbolic bird, a very important symbolic bird, and a symbolic bird of royalty. It had a lot to do with Egyptian kings. I have no idea where this came from, and then on the front it has these beautiful flowers. These are all symbolic, and then they're hearts. It's so wonderful, and there's one with the heart you can see even more. Look at the embroidery, and it has all kinds of, it's all gold thread and sequins. And I don't know where this came from. It could have come from a bishop in the inner city church. I don't know. but in any case, it could come from the Middle East. It could be from Pakistan. It could even be a wedding robe for a man, for a wedding in the Middle East. In any case, I love wearing it, and we had a Downton Abbey party, and as host I wore this and made my debut in it. So, glad to have you with me today, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And don't forget, tonight you can see me online or on YouTube anytime, and tonight we'll be doing a fireside reading of His Horse and the Boy, and the Horse and His Boy, sorry, always reversing it. Anyway, I will see you soon, see you tonight. We're going to talk about unfinished paintings also. It's part of tonight's discussion. So have a good afternoon, and see you at 7. God bless.